Lisa Franz. Really enjoyed talking to Lisa. She's nutrition. She's a nutritionalist. She helps coach people with weight loss and getting back into shape, into great condition, and maintain it. I open in the conversation with maintenance mode. Are many of you familiar with maintenance mode when it comes to health and weight loss? It's just maintaining that area. So many times I know I'm very goal orientated, where I'm trying to reach this weight, trying to reach this fat, and when I'm there, it's hard to kind of maintain and stay at that level. She's got some great hacks to address that, and how she views it is very different. And I love her attitude. She's been to 53 countries. She's originally from Germany. She was a police officer for 5 years in New Zealand. We get to that and how it burned her out a bit. And she went to school for nutrition and kind of brought her back to that. She's now in somewhere in South America, but it's fascinating nomadic life and kind of coupling with helping people with their health. Mindset, some excellent ways to view things. Many of you know about my struggles with weight. I was at 340 pounds, and often I feel like that person is still inside me trying to get out. And I have to tell myself, even to this day, I'm not that person. Where I find myself kind of slipping, but it's a wonderful conversation with Lisa Franz. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration.
To talk to you for a while, Lisa Franz. Thank you so much for your time today. So, describe maintenance mode as far as nutrition and health is concerned, and why can it be so difficult?
Well, I actually think that is what the majority of people really struggle with. We are, as a society, very good at actually losing weight. People always think, oh, we're not very good at losing weight, but people are doing very well at losing weight, especially now. We're at the beginning of the year as we're recording this. Most people are motivated. They get on their specific plan, probably something quite extreme where they're cutting out a particular food group or something like that. What we're really bad at is maintaining our results. It's something like 87% of people who lose weight gain it back. And usually, as some listeners might know historically, we also gain a little bit extra weight on top of that. We don't just gain the weight back, we gain a
Wow.
little bit more. So that is quite frustrating. And on the other side, we're also, of course, obviously pretty good at gaining weight just in general, and that's not a good thing. And if
Mm.
we look at it from an obesity perspective, we're also pretty good at gaining muscle if someone is ambitious in going to the gym and so on. But what we are really, really not that great at is simply maintaining results. And I think to an extent, because it sounds boring, like people always ask you, what are your goals? And I would assume that few of the listeners heard when they were asking their friends, what are your New Year's resolutions? That hardly anybody said, oh, I just want to maintain. I just want to maintain my health, or I just want to maintain my body weight. Very few people have that as an actual goal. And
Hmm.
it's just not enticing enough to say something like that. And so I think one of the reasons for that is that it's so intangible. Like, we like seeing numbers go up or down, or having a specific target. And if you just say, I want to maintain, it's kind of like, okay, what am I working towards
Hmm.
exactly? So there are a few methods, though, how we can make quote unquote maintenance phase, especially in nutrition, a little bit more interesting. Because even if we're talking about maintaining your body weight, you can still improve many things alongside of that and feel
Hmm.
better. So we can focus more on performance related things. We could say, hey, let's set some targets when it comes to the gym or whatever sport you're practicing. We can set some targets when it comes to improving your blood work, for instance. That's a, especially as we age, that's a really great thing to be doing regularly, to get blood markers taken and to look at, okay, how can I improve my cholesterol? How can I improve my vitamin absorption? And all these things, which are definitely related to, or easier when we're maintaining our weight and eating sufficient. Because, of course, if we're always just dieting, our body's also not getting all the micronutrients that it probably wants. And if we're always eating way too much, then our body is kind of overwhelmed with the extra energy that we have, and it does not optimize things so much either. So that's something that we can focus on, or we can focus on improving sleep, because if we are eating enough and if we're maintaining
Hmm.
our body weight, we can focus more on just in general, where our body has a better time with hormones, and that includes the sleep hormones as well. So we can make
Hmm.
maintenance phase a lot more interesting when it comes to health, but also when it comes to body composition and what we look like. Because even though we might just maintain the same weight, we can still improve our body fat level, so reduce the body fat and increase
Hmm.
muscle mass. And that is very closely tied to health outcomes. So, for instance, we could have two individuals, one weighing, or both of them technically being in a healthy BMI range. So, meaning their weight is pretty decent. Let's say a female, maybe 5'2", 5'3", she weighs 150 pounds or something like that. And she might have a body fat percentage of 35. And then we have a similar, someone of similar height and weight, but that lady has a body fat percentage of 20%.
Hmm.
And the one at 20 is definitely going to be healthier, objectively speaking, or speaking from the numbers, because she's going to have less fat around the organs, the visceral fat, which is the quote unquote dangerous fat. And she, like all the other things, she's going to have a better definition. She's going to look more shaped than the other lady. So yes, Joe, while maintenance is not very popular, I'm a big fan of maintenance periods, because it also helps us restore our relationship with food.
Hmm.
For example, many of the women I work with, they go through so many diets that they in the end don't even know what to eat anymore. Sometimes
Hmm.
I've honestly heard someone saying, like, I heard and read even that I can't drink water anymore. Like, what am I
Hmm.
supposed to put in my mouth? There's this alkaline and HP and blah, and the tap water is polluted. Like, how can I survive? So yes, very tricky question.
87% gain the weight back and then gain more.
Yes, yes, yes.
Terrible,
So,
terrible,
like, I
terrible.
think, I mean, I might be butchering this statistic like precisely, but I think like 90% or so of people that set themselves a weight loss goal do lose some weight. They might not reach their goal, but they'll lose some weight. But 87 of them gain the weight, if not more, back.
I mean, anecdotally, I know many people who lost a lot of weight and then gained it back. They got like the surgery and they look great for, a year or so. And then you see, and you just slowly start to see them kind of gain it back and gain it back. I mean, um, it's very tough. It's very tough to kind of maintain that. Our food is especially here in the States, it's just geared for us to gain weight.
Unfortunately, and it is so easily accessible, right? Back
Yeah.
in the day, I mean, we had to work for it a little bit more, or we might have had these treats, but they were truly special. Let's say
Mm.
someone, even 50 years ago or so, you might have a big Christmas celebration, and there probably was cake and all these things, but it was special. It was for Christmas Day. It was not something that you started eating as soon as Thanksgiving was over and they roll out the Christmas edition of whatever else, and then we essentially start indulging in the Christmas food late November up until January 1st, and then
Mm.
you have a few weeks where people try to eat less sweets, and then Valentine's comes around, and they're like, it's just so easily available. And yeah, that really plays into the obesity that we're experiencing, in my opinion. For one, that availability, but also just generally that we don't have to quote unquote work for it so much. And I do think that the States is quite unique in that way, or let's say like the Western diet overall, because
Mm.
certainly the UK and Germany and all the like is following close behind,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I mean, I don't know how much you read in terms of my profile or so, but I travel quite a lot,
Yes, you
and
do. Nomad.
yes, and because of that, I have had the pleasure to get a bit of an insight into many different cultures. So to give the listener just an idea, I'm currently in Colombia. I just spent 7 weeks in Bolivia, been mostly traveling around Latin American countries for the last 2 years, but before that also spent time in Southeast Asia. I'm originally from Germany, so yes, many different cultures I've come across. And while in many of them, including Colombia, for example, there are certainly things like McDonald's popping up and more fast foods on the rise as well, and then things like Uber Eats and the like.
Mm.
um, Nonetheless, generally speaking, it is still a more active lifestyle. So
Mm.
you walk to work, you pick up your groceries by hand, also here because it's a bigger city. And so people just are more active. Or over the summer, I went to visit my family, and my mom is also very active generally. So they live in Germany still, and she loves gardening. She takes her bicycle to go to work, and she doesn't do like sports, or she's not someone to quote unquote exercise, no structured exercise other than occasionally going for a hike, but she's just very active. And so I said to her, Mom, I'd be curious how many steps you get per day, because
Mm.
I tend to recommend to my clients to aim for somewhere between like 8 to 10,000 steps per
Yeah.
day, just as a general measure. And so I put my Apple Watch on her for a week,
Huh.
and every single day, she got over 12,000 steps, not even
Wow.
trying. Like, she didn't go for a walk or anything. She just walking up and down and doing the laundry and doing this and doing here. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's insane. But then I thought of it. My grandma, who is 88 years old, she still takes her bicycle to buy groceries. Like,
Wow.
literally, the only thing that she allows my dad to purchase for her is like milk and drink, and like things to drink, because that's a little bit dangerous transporting
Heavy.
that on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bicycle.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's just much more active. And then, for example, last year was the first year in since pre-pandemic that I went to visit my best friend in the States. And I went to a gym there and wanted to go to a coffee shop across the road. I wanted to walk. I went to the gym by car, but I wanted to walk across the road to the coffee shop because I thought it's just silly if I literally just drive from one side of the road to the other. And I kid you not, I could not walk there. There was no walkways because it was kind of like a
Right.
highway, and
Right.
so there was no pedestrian crossing. And I just thought that is so sad that the urban environment, or
Mm.
the layout of the city, it forced me to take the
Mm.
car, and actually taking the car and reparking it took me like 7 minutes, whereas crossing the street
Mm.
would have, like, it was honestly like 100 yards, if
Hmm.
that. So it blew my mind. And to no surprise, like, I honestly don't blame anybody who is not in the shape that they want to be, who's struggling to moderate their food intake, because exactly like you said, our foods are literally designed to be
Yeah.
overeaten, right? The food industry, they pay people a gazillion dollars to figure out how can we make this even more tasty so people get quote unquote addicted to it.
Yeah, it certainly is. Lisa, when you were explaining maintenance mode, it's interesting to just kind of keep that level, but just maybe work on your muscle. And in business, I talk to a lot of business owners, and there's certain periods where they can't increase sales. So I said, okay, well then increase profit then. It's very
Mm.
similar
Mm.
because your revenue, your weight is your top line, and perhaps your profit can be your muscle. I don't know, it just kind of came to
I
me.
know, I love that analogy, absolutely. And I think even in that example for the businessman or the business in that instance, during that time, they probably still or also have the opportunity to perfect and improve and
Yes,
optimize all the other
yes.
things. Because if you just keep growing as a business, or if you just keep, numbers going up, at some point, sometimes you have a hard time catching up with things, or things start falling behind because it's going
Mm.
too fast almost. So I love the analogy.
You also mentioned, Lisa, BMI, body mass index. I know a lot of friends who are very much against that because it's height versus because it doesn't calculate weight. What you're feeling there? I'm
Well,
sorry, it
no,
doesn't calculate muscle.
exactly. No, I'm
Yeah,
100% aligned with that because exactly, if you have a bodybuilder, for instance, and I mean, how healthy or unhealthy that is the other question, but still, if you have a bodybuilder, technically, they're very, very
like
often,
obese. Yeah,
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 classified as obese when they might have like 5% body fat percent. Yeah, and so I absolutely agree with you. I think waist to hip ratio is a little bit more indicative in the sense of
mm,
where the fat is distributed, because again, it's that visceral fat, that fat around the organs, that we really don't want, and that tends to be the most dangerous one. But yeah, of course, just overall, there's something called the a DEXA scan, which is in the nutrition space or in the training space as well. And that's kind of as the body analysis that's most reliable. So basically, it's not one of those scales that you step on in the gym and it tells you a body fat percentage. Those tend to be quite unreliable. Also, a DEXA scan is actually like you lay there, and it's a very, very reliable machine. You usually have to pay a little bit for it. It's like $15 or so, and then you get a very accurate reading of what your lean body mass is, what your body fat percentage is, and actually also bone density, which particularly for women is quite important in order to prevent osteoporosis, or just to get a read of where you are in terms of that.
yeah. Certainly, there's got to be other ways. Just yeah, looking at muscle because yeah, I have athlete friends that are like you say 6-7% body, and yeah, according to BMI, they're obese. But it was good for a while, and it's good for some, just not generally. And you're a big traveler. I mean, the places you've been is incredible. How do you maintain? So I've got a weak excuse. I generally travel for business, but it's domestically. But still, it's hard to eat well when you're not in control of it. When I'm here, generally when people cook their own, they generally cook healthier, right? We're using vegetables, we're using protein, etc. But when you go out, you never know what they're putting in at restaurants, and it's tough. What are some of your tips to maintain that?
Yeah, that's a really great point because, yes, many of the people I work with also travel a lot for work or pleasure, however it might be. I think it starts with mindset. Oftentimes,
Mm,
when we think I'm going away, we almost, even though we don't want to, but we almost use that as I'm getting out of my routine. And I'm such a big proponent of routines
mm,
in general, whether
mm,
that is a certain sleep routine, going to bed at a particular time and having a particular rising time. Of course, some degree of flexibility is always warranted, but nonetheless, or a routine when it comes to your training, let's say training 3 times per week, a routine when it comes to hydration, supplements, and so on. And most of the time, when we travel, we think, okay, I'm going to resume when I'm back. And that's where it all starts going downhill, because
mm,
especially when we're traveling, that's when those things become even more important. We're
mm.
only going to feel our best or perform our best for work travel if we are somewhat decently slept. Again, it happens, the occasional red eye flight or so, but generally speaking, if we can control it, let's book a flight that allows us to have a somewhat regular sleep schedule. If we can avoid it, also let's see that, or if we can maintain a little bit of activity throughout that time, also pick a hotel where there is a gym, even if it's boring walking on the treadmill, but you're actually going to perform a lot better at your work meeting or whatever you might have if you
Mm,
had a little bit of activity before. And you're going to feel better after your flight if you got a little bit of movement in. And if not, go for a walk, explore the city, and stay active that way. Take your supplements with you if you can. And I mean, I'm not I'm the first person to say that whole foods are always going to be best.
right.
But let's be real, as you said, when we're traveling, most of the time the food quality is going to be a little bit lower. It's not going to be as easy to come across vegetables, to come across high quality meat and so on as it would be when you're at home. So let's help out with some omega-3 fatty acids or some magnesium, maybe taking some electrolytes with you if you have um, a longer flight and you're battling jet lag as well, and things like that. They actually go a long way. So that's where I would start. And then when
Mm,
it comes to more specific tips for nutrition when traveling, I like to recommend when eating out to to aim for something which is a little bit leaned on the paleo diet, quote unquote, but I
mm,
don't even want to call it a diet. I would just simply say a whole food focus. So pick a meal that is sort of centered around vegetables and protein, and try to limit the processed carbs that are so easy to come by. So maybe don't pick the pizza and the pasta right there for lunch. You're going to have a really deep afternoon low and want to go to sleep instead of performing well at your work meeting. Instead, maybe go for the steak and some vegetables and a little bit of baked potato or so.
mm,
So the whole foods, and by whole foods, I mean foods that are minimally processed.
right.
Sure, rice is a little bit processed as well, but it's still, in my opinion, considered a whole food. So something like that. Of course, if we can ask for dressings and sauces on the side, that seems like a really simple or kind of almost negligible or forgettable point.
Mm,
But if the calories pile on with sauces, with dressings, so at least if it's on the side, you can control, do I have a tablespoon of that, or is my salad actually drowned in a creamy whatever Caesar dressing and not really making it a healthy meal anymore? So that's some simple hacks. Or I do love a good like crudo or meals where there's hardly any oil on there, because exactly to your point, many locations might use very cheap or
mm,
highly processed oil. So just minimizing it on there. And then to the point of alcohol, I do know that in many work settings, alcohol
mm,
does play a big part. But I believe that the more we learn to speak up for ourselves, we actually impress other people, and sometimes they might even come along. So, like, it's, at first they might say, "Oh, come on, Lisa, you're so boring. Have a glass of wine." But if I say, "Oh no, actually, I want to go for a walk after work today. I want to feel active and healthy, and I'm actually trying to limit my alcohol intake this month or so." They might look a little bit odd at you for a couple of hours, but I would assume that at least one person sitting at that table is thinking, "Oh, damn, she has made she spoke up about that. I wish I wouldn't have ordered my glass or let them
mm,
pressure me into that." And it's just going to help you feel better throughout your travels. There's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying a glass of wine here and there, but maybe not in the middle of the workday, and maybe not letting that one glass turn into four drinks in the middle of the afternoon, and then
mm,
the next day gets worse and the next day gets worse. So I think that's another thing that we're struggling with as a society, just generally saying no, doing
mm,
fewer things, doing them better, and saying no to more things. And that applies to food as well. Eating fewer foods. Not We don't need that much variety. Yes, variety is great for our gut health. We want to have a variety of vegetables and fruits and so on. And I get that variety is enticing when it comes to just eating something new, but we don't need to have it all, and it doesn't always need to be the most tastiest meals of them all. Sometimes food is also just okay to be fuel, or to
yes.
to taste somewhat decent. It doesn't always need to be drowned in sauce. And the great thing is that our taste buds actually adapt just as much as they can and have adapted to all this added sugar and added salt and so on, we can wean ourselves off of that a little bit.
Mm,
Anyone
mm,
who's weaned themselves off of having like 2 tablespoons of sugar in their coffee and is now drinking black, or even just with 1 tablespoon, it takes a while. And logically, it's not going to taste exactly the same, but your taste buds do adjust. And I think that's great because we start appreciating the purity and the real flavor of whatever food. So the actual steak, perhaps, as opposed to the steak drowned in pepper and mushroom sauce with cream and a tablespoon of butter and chimichurri. So
mm,
just having, going back to like, what is the actual food that I'm trying to eat here, and enjoying it in a more of a pure form.
mm. Yeah, I love what you said earlier about sometimes it's just fuel. This idea that every bite we take in our life has to be this, party. One of my biggest, you got to say no, Lisa, like you said, but I go to these events and there's just high end, expensive food everywhere, and it's right there, just for part of it. And there's desserts, and it's very hard to say no to these things, but um, you have to learn to do so, and you have to learn moderation. You were a New Zealand police officer for 5 years. You said it did. You CrossFit a couple hours a day every day, but being a police person took a little bit from you mentally and physically. And tell me about that transition in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a very exciting time in my life, both in positive and negative aspects. I want to just briefly, before we go into this talk, just a tiny bit more about the saying no, because I think it's so, so
Yeah.
important. So I do want to encourage the listeners that, also, like, on a positive note, that the more you do it in one area of your life, the more you're going to feel confident in other areas
Ah.
of your life. So even if,
Hmm.
the soccer club from your, I don't know, from your nephew's friend asks you to, if you can please bring a cake for the next event, and your plate is actually already so full, learning to say, I'm sorry, I can't commit to this. Next time, I'm reliable, but for the month of January, I'm
Hmm.
actually trying to cut back on some obligations. Or people asking you, hey, can we go and have a drink on Friday at 11 p.m.? And you're like, well, I was planning to be in bed at 10. Learning to say, like, to have your boundaries and keeping them, it builds confidence within you, so that when you are in front of that huge buffet with tons of sweets and so on, that you also feel confident in, oh, actually, I don't need a second helping of the dessert, because one was sufficient, and I feel that's enough. So I guess, like, especially buffet settings, or like all you can eat settings, and I mean Christmas that we just passed, that's for most people an all you can eat sort of setting.
Hmm.
I do have a few like specific recommendations for people there, where I usually say first plate should almost only be vegetables and protein. The reason
Hmm.
for that is it helps a lot with satiation. It takes away that initial excitement that we all get when we see a ton of food in front of us, where we're like, "Oh, I want to
Right.
eat it all." And the quote unquote worst thing we can do is starting with the bread basket, starting with the really calorie dense things, the mac and
Mm.
cheese, or the whatever it is, mashed potato or so, that kind of is high in calories, but it doesn't fill us up. So, and we just keep going and going and going after that. Many people think, oh, I don't want to waste any calories on the healthy food first, but that's kind of backwards thinking. So if your first plate is
Hmm.
mostly vegetable and protein centered, and then the second rule being that you give yourself like 10-15 minutes before you go for the next plate, just so that your body can actually sense how full you are and register
Mm.
some kind of hunger, it's gonna very likely
Hmm.
make you get less on that second plate. And on the second plate, I say, like, sure, you can have some of what you want to try. I would recommend, though, that the foods that you feel like you can have at any time of the year, for instance, the bread roll. For most people, that's like, at nearly every event, there's a bread
Hmm.
roll. But
Hmm.
it's not going to be the most special bread roll ever. Just skip that and go to something where you're like, oh, that's an empanada. I haven't had an empanada in 2 years. I really want to know what that taste like here because it's special and I've never had it. So think of what's special and what you can actually enjoy in the moment, as opposed to it just being like it looks good and it smells
Mm,
good. So that's kind of what I would say on that, on the food front, and really just slowing down and that mindfulness, even when it comes to an event like that, is huge. So not eating and just shoving it in while you're walking, but instead
mm,
maybe sitting down and actually like looking at your food, trying to not look at your screens or whatever while you're eating. That's so underrated when it comes to helping our body and our mind enjoy smaller quantities of food in a bigger way. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to kind of round off with that, but
really
because
good
I do
points.
think learning to say no more often, doing fewer things is really
Mm,
something that can help our quality of life as well.
mm,
But yeah, transitioning into my life transition. So before I was a police officer, I studied exercise science, health promotion, and nutrition, and I've always had a passion for activity and helping people live a healthier life. But when I finished my degree, I was kind of like, I don't really know what to do with that. I don't want to be a personal trainer. I didn't really want to work as a PE teacher, and I just sort of felt lost. And so I thought I want to have something with more structure around it. I want to have a quote unquote steady income and all those things that are sort of lacking in the sports industry. And yeah, I just thought, okay, why don't I apply? It's not something that I always had. It was not my childhood dream thinking I want to be a police officer, especially not in New Zealand. I didn't know I was going to live there at
mm,
the time, and so I applied and I got in. And in New Zealand, it's, let's say the requirements are a little bit different than probably in the rest of the world. The training only takes 4 months, and then the
mm.
first 2 years on the job are still considered your training, but you're basically working as a fully pledged police officer already. And I learned a lot during that time, of course, not just in regards to weapons or legal aspects or anything like that, but more in the sense of humanity. I probably believe in the good in people too much. I grew up very sheltered, and so I just always thought, people are generally honest and people generally have the best in mind for others. And so that was honestly a really really good training for me because I mean, I still believe in the good in people, but just to give you an example, after my first arrest, which was someone who stole something in the supermarket, so once you arrest someone, you have to interview them and like get them to confess on camera what they did, essentially. Like that's kind of the goal, not pressuring them, but just like, hey, so tell me what happened today, and then what can you see in this video from the CCTV footage, blah blah blah. And so I asked the person what happened, and he was like, oh, I didn't steal it. It was my best friend, and he ran away. And I was like, oh, really? And he said, yeah, it was my friend. It wasn't me. He just shoved it into my backpack and then he ran off. It wasn't me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I believe you. I was about to walk out and let the guy walk also. And until my colleague came in, she was like, excuse me, can I just like talk to you for a second? And she was like, Lisa, you saw him on CCTV steal that thing? Like he's lying right into your face. So
Wow.
so that's the kind of eye opening that I needed. um, but yeah, I mean, also I will add to this that I would not have been, or I wouldn't have wanted to be a police officer in Germany and nor in the States, just because crime rates are a lot higher. At the
Yeah.
time, like where I was in New Zealand, a smaller city called Queenstown. It is known as the adventure capital of the world, and certainly there is a lot of tourism and a lot of people. So the actual population is about 30,000, but during high season there's about twice the amount of people because there are so many tourists. Nonetheless, the majority of the crime that we were dealing with was like driving offenses, stealing, alcohol offenses, and a little bit of domestic violence, but it was
Hmm.
not like huge gang scene or
Right.
drugs or anything like that. So it was good until all the shift work took really a toll on my physical and mental health. I We had a very weird shift roster, which was essentially 2 day shifts, 2 late shifts until 3 a.m., 2 night shifts, and then 3 days off, one of which you spend sleeping, and then you start again. So your circadian rhythm gets completely
Mm.
messed up because you don't ever get used to anything. So after a few years of that, I essentially, like, on average would be sleeping 3.5 to 4 hours per day.
Wow.
And because I, like, when it's bright out or when I hear noises, my body's just like, let's do something. I did
Mm.
all the quote unquote hacks that people recommend you do it in order to improve your sleep when you're on a shift roster. So, like, dark room, white noise or earplugs, no caffeine too close to bedtime, like all the things. Nothing helped. My body was just like, I want to do something. It's daytime.
Wow.
And so that over the course of the years also led to, like, injuries, because I was, as you mentioned, like, training so hard at the same time.
Mm.
And more than anything, it really did affect my mental health. I'm a very, very positive person normally. But at some point there, I was, I started to think, like, oh, if I don't wake up tomorrow, it's fine. And my ex-husband, or now husband at the time, said to me at some point, when I wanted to have dinner with him, about to sit down, and he took his plate and went out and wanted to eat on the balcony. And I said, why don't you want to eat with me? And he said, you're not the person that I married anymore. You're different.
Mm.
So the lack of sleep, and just, I guess, also seeing things that you see in that kind of job, just changed me. And I was like, whoa, I need to get out of this. And essentially, in my last year within the police, I had already made the decision. I wanted to get back to my actual passion, which is nutrition and fitness, and at the same time, create a job with which I can work online and help people worldwide. And so I started working part time for a nutrition coaching company, which is actually located in Seattle in the US. And all they did was they gave me clients. So I didn't want to be preoccupied thinking about, what does my marketing look like? Where do I get the
Mm.
next clients from? I wanted to be able to be and become the best coach that I could possibly be at first, before starting my own company. So after 2 years of working for them, I decided to go out on my own. I felt most confident enough, and have been running my business, nutrition coaching and life, for about 3.5 years now, and loving every minute of it. And
Mm.
not a day goes by that I'm not grateful that I can now work from anywhere in the world. It truly is such a freedom, such a luxury, really.
So after 5 years, you had had enough. How long do you think you would have lasted till it did permanent damage to you?
Oh, maybe probably another, like, 3, 4, maybe 5 years.
Wow.
But I mean, the statistics are pretty clear that people that do shift work like this, they die earlier, like, not
Mm.
just half a year or so, like 10 year on average, 10 years earlier.
Wow.
And a while, of course, we have to have people that work on shift. We need to have first responders. We need to have people attending to the gas station and so on in the middle of the night. So truly, all my appreciation goes out to anyone who does that, and does that for an extended period of time. But I just couldn't deal with the sleeping roster. And if someone, I mean, it's a lot clearer that when the person doing the shift work can still sleep 6 to 8 hours per night, it's very different. But I mean, I slept basically half of that for that amount of
Wow.
time.
Wow.
And it just, your body tolerates a lot, but only for a certain amount of time until it starts rebelling. And it's great that it does, because otherwise we probably wouldn't act. We would just keep going and going and going, and yeah, not listening to it. So thank you, body, for telling us what we should be doing.
Mm. Sleep, nutrition, and exercise. The three
Mm.
most important, the pillars of healthiness.
I would absolutely say so. Adding in, like, some mental health aspects and
Mm.
practices, such as, spending time with people that you love, for some people, like for me, I love going for walks and being in
Mm.
nature. That really fills my cup. Or learning things. Like, I think everybody is very different when it comes to the mental health aspect, but figuring out what it is that replenishes you from your day, or that just brings you joy, I think that's another crucial component. But certainly sleep, nutrition, and movement. And it doesn't even have to be yes, the hard out gym routine for most people. I think as long as you enjoy it and it's something that you can stick with, that's the most important part. But of course, resistance training is very beneficial in order to help us maintain functionality as we age, and being able to carry our groceries when we're old and 88 years
Mm.
old and wanting to drive to or
Hmm.
ride our bicycles to the grocery store like my grandma.
I like what you said about going outside too. Just getting exposure to the sun, vitamin
Mhm.
D. So many of us during the pandemic, would have benefited just from just natural vitamin D. It's just so easy.
Worst recommendations ever that we had
Right,
there.
to
I mean,
stay
like,
inside.
but I know we don't even want to get into the details, but like literally, even if any kind of recommendation of like, hey, maybe you should sit on your balcony and drink your
Yes.
coffee there instead of
Mm,
just being inside, that fresh air and just being connected with some kind of environmental
mm,
exposure. Like for me,
mm,
it's even just things like hearing the birds chirp
mm,
or like any kind of nature noise and some greenery where I'm like, oh, this feels so rejuvenating, and I feel just connected to something else other than just me, 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 me. I think
mm,
if we're so living such a self-centered and self-absorbed life, it's easy to get stuck in your head and all your little worries that seem huge in the moment, but really don't make that big of a difference when it comes to your life in total.
mm. Lisa, getting back to maintenance mode. So, I struggled all my life with weight. And when you find yourself giving yourself excuses like it's the holidays, I'm traveling, it's work, it's whatever, and then it starts getting out of hand. And the next thing you know, you're 10, you're 15 pounds overweight, and you just get angry at yourself. And so then you got to go into this big loss mode, and it's so tough to do. You're cutting calories, you're exercising more, but it's just how can you what are some hacks just to when you start slipping out of that maintenance mode and going into a negative direction, how do you look at yourself and turn yourself around?
Mm, love the question. And I think it ties in with what we were talking about earlier with the people that you've seen yo yo back or
Mm,
gaining more back. And the issue there, just as well as us slipping, so to speak, is that we are not looking or thinking about the identity of the person that we should or want to have. So,
mm,
meaning some people that lose a lot of weight, they think of it as in a short-term goal. They think of it as in that's what I'm doing right now in order to
mm,
get to my goal. And
mm,
once I'm at my goal, I can just continue living the way that I was before, for instance. Or if we're struggling like right now, we're still so in the I just want to stay the same person, but I want to have different results. That's not going to work. That's not going to work for anything, whether it is changing your personality or changing your spending habits or changing like anything. You need to actually think of what the person that I want to become, what do they do on a daily basis? And like I encourage people to think about that on the most as detailed as you can as you possibly can, because that helps you really visualize who you want to be. So for instance, what does their day-to-day routine look like? The person like in 10 years time, if you could be anybody or any version of yourself in 10 years time, at what time do they wake up? What's the first thing that they do when they wake up? So,
mm,
for instance, do you wake up feeling energized, or do you wake up feeling groggy? Do you drink a glass of water, or are you going straight for the coffee into the computer? Are you starting your day with some movement? Are there people in your home that you share your life with? Like thinking about all these details, while that doesn't seem directly related to weight or to even nutrition and exercise, they will help you step more into that role of making the better decisions on a daily, on a regular basis, because it is all these teeny tiny little decisions that add up. The first decision of like, oh, I'm not going to stick with that habit anymore. Like I've done this for the last few days, but no, it's not going to get noticed that today I'm hitting snooze 7 times and not going to the gym. I'll just go back tomorrow. And
mm,
then the next week you allow yourself to do that twice. And the week after that you allow yourself to do that 3 times. And before you know it, you're a couple of months into it and you haven't gone to the gym at all. So
hmm,
it's the little small decisions. While we can all mess up and are allowed a mistake or a misstep here and there, I would say every decision that we make really counts. And the more clear you can be on that person, like how healthy they are, what sort of people they surround themselves with, even to the point of what do you listen to? Because if we are bombarded with only negative things, or if all our friends are trying to get us to binge drink and to overeat, that's probably who
Mm,
you're going to be, because swimming against the stream is really really hard. So even just finding one friend, two friend that helps you, or that is a little bit further along the path than you are, is going to help bring you up, is going to help you up level. And of course, joining any kind of exercise group or finding a gym buddy that you go to the gym with is helpful. Having a coach, clearly I believe in coaching, since I'm a coach. But
mm,
it doesn't even have to be that. Like auditing your social media and canceling everything that's just quote unquote food porn, and maybe subscribing more to people that promote a healthy lifestyle and encourage you. That can make the difference when you're driving to work, and usually you listen to ads about McDonald's here and where the best muffin is, and suddenly
mm,
you change that to a fitness podcast. You're probably not going to take that detour to McDonald's.
mm,
So it's literally like our diet is literally everything that surrounds us. And I think yeah, that's often very much underrated when we think about goals or maintaining things. Just creating an environment where the thing that we want to maintain is the norm and not the exception. And
mm,
sometimes that can also just be like having that conversation with your partner, instead of just thinking, oh, I'm just going to do that diet on my own. I don't actually want to let her know or want to let him know that I'm trying to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever. Instead of doing that and just saying like, hey honey, I want to focus on or improve my health a little bit this year. I want to go on a hike every month, and I'm aiming to get to 10,000 steps. Can you ask me every evening how
mm,
many steps I have? And if I haven't reached 8,000, can you like encourage me to not sit down on the couch yet or so? And that might be annoying. And maybe your partner doesn't actually want that, but they might be able to help hold you accountable, or they might even say, hey, I'm joining in, that sounds awesome. I've actually been kind of annoyed with my little love handles there as well, so let's do it together, it's going to be easier.
mm. Yeah, Lisa, I like what you said about identity, because I got up, I was at 340 pounds at my max. And I feel now that I'm not there, every once in a while, I feel like that person is trying to get out. That the 340-pound person still inside me trying to get out. And I have to say to myself, I am not that person.
Mm,
Just identifying that speaks volumes. Because if you believe that,
yes.
you'll start acting that way and you'll start eating that way. I
Yes.
am one that exercises normally. If you just say that and you believe it, you will do it. It's
Yes.
important identity.
I love that. And I often say to clients, when they make progress, and after a few months they have a slip up, quote unquote. So
Mm,
they usually report back like feeling guilty, and oh, I can't believe I did that, I felt so horrible about it, and why did I do that, and beating themselves up because maybe the scale is back up and so on. I'm like, hey, it's a great thing that that happened, because you feel like you feeling bad about this is showing your growth. If that would have happened and you were like, oh my gosh, I missed that old part of me, I'm just going to go back there, that would have been like, okay, what was all your growth for? And actually this old part of you coming back means they're trying to pull you back into the comfort zone that we all love to be in, but doesn't really serve us at all. So the fact that they're trying to come back and pull you back down actually means you have
mm,
kind of ventured out of there. And the good thing is also, and you will probably be able to attest to that, normally these pullbacks, these retractions, which I like to call them, they happen less frequently as we grow. So in the first instance with that client, she might have her quote unquote slip up after 6 weeks. And then the next episode might be after 8 weeks. And then the next one might be after 4 months. And then maybe it happens like once a year where she has uh, a binge weekend or so, and then a few, like it happens less and less frequently, and that is such a great sign. But I also like what you said about like saying out loud, I'm not that person. I'm also
mm,
a big fan of like mantras. Always sounds too woohoo to many people, but it's just a kind of like a belief sentence. And even speaking out things that haven't happened yet or don't feel real yet, I think
mm,
that's where people sometimes struggle with mantras because it's like, well, I don't believe that yet. For example, many of the people that I work with, they have very limiting beliefs around food in general or weight loss in general. And like we all have limiting beliefs, some maybe in regards to money, some maybe in regards to how they need to be living their lives or so. But most of the people that I work with have limiting beliefs when it comes to food. So they might believe I'm not worthy of having the body that I actually want to have, or I can't stick with this. I have no self control. That's also a limiting belief. Or saying weight loss in my entire family is hard, or weight loss during menopause is impossible.
Mm.
Weight loss as a busy person or as a mom of three is impossible. Like all these things, they're limiting beliefs. And so, of course, first we need to identify them. We need to like actually pause, and the way often that they are coming out is exactly in those instances where it's like we've had a mess up. Now let's look at why that happened. Maybe that person's had a really stressful week, and then on Thursday they caved because the stress was piling up and they didn't do anything to compensate for it. So like no exercise, they didn't talk to their therapist or husband about it or
Mm.
whatever, and then Thursday hits and they see this and that, and just suddenly everything goes out the window. So
Mm.
that's actually really great because we can build on that. And then once we have the limiting beliefs, the first step, and that doesn't sound very impactful, but it is simply like reversing that and switching it around. So if someone says weight loss during menopause is impossible, saying weight loss during menopause is absolutely possible. There is lots of social proofs. I can literally go online and show you, 100 people that are in their mid 50s and have lost weight. So clearly your brain is telling you something that's not, factually not true. Or weight loss as a business person is not possible, or when running 2 3 businesses is not possible. Again, many many examples of people that make it happen. And why physiologically should that not be the case? Should that not be
Mm.
possible for you? So just bringing a little bit of logic in there and reversing how you speak to yourself, the things that we tell ourselves over and over again, they become our beliefs. And so the more of these positive mantras we can have, the better, and the more we're going to actually take on that identity as you were talking about. So I love that you had
Mm.
that for yourself as well.
What kind of person do you not want to work with, Lisa? Not.
Ooh, that's tricky. I mean, generally speaking, I of course want to help everybody, but I do find it very hard to work with people, or I've had people that wanted to just pay me and they didn't think that they needed to put in any work themselves. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like you just pay your advisor and you hope he takes care of whatever, and that doesn't work with nutrition and fitness. Like even if I lived in your house, it wouldn't work. You could
Right.
still probably take your car and drive in the middle of the night somewhere to eat that snack, even if I was cooking all
Mm.
the meals for you. You like I need people to have at least some amount of intrinsic motivation. So meaning not just waiting for someone else to motivate them. And yeah, I mean there are certain people that are very naturally intrinsically motivated, and other people that need a little bit more external motivation, like the goal of going to a vacation in July and working towards that. That's
Mm.
absolutely fine to
Mm.
have some
Mm.
kind of motivation like that, or to have the motivation of, I want to fit into that dress again, or so. That's also fine. But generally speaking, along the way, we want to develop more internal motivation where it comes more from a self worth kind of place. And I can do that kind of place. Yeah. So, yeah, we're building that up, of course, no question. But there needs to be a little bit of that to start off with, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, the unmotivated like that. There are certain, I know people like that who just kind of pay for things and they'll take care of it. But yeah, they've got to work on it themselves. Otherwise, it's can't control what you put in the pie hole, Lisa. You've got to,
Yeah, absolutely. And I
you
mean,
know,
like, motivation overall is overrated. Absolutely. I do think that
mm,
it does come down to habits, but nonetheless, I also understand the person that's listening and
habits.
says, "Hey, I need to see results. Otherwise, I'm losing motivation." Like many of the times, so people in my space that also have a similar attitude when it comes to, oh, we want to give our clients sustainable results, we want to focus on habits. I 1,000,000% agree with that, and I want to do the same thing. But what they sometimes fail to do then is giving the client some kind of initial buy-in that keeps the client motivated. So, I
Mm,
mean, most people are all well and good if for 2 weeks they don't see the scale budge and they're like, okay, okay, yes, I'm doing it all. I'm doing it all. Lisa, how much longer do I have to do it all before I see some kind of result? But if after 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you're still doing all the things, they're focusing on sleep, nutrition, and training, and nothing happens, they're gonna lose motivation. So for a
mm.
coach, it's still very important to give the client, the person, what they want, and to even if that sometimes means being a little bit more aggressive or being a bit stricter. Some people just respond to a little bit strict, strict of an approach better than that whole cuddling and so on. So learning what kind of approach works best for you is definitely very important.
Lisa, has there been anything in the last month, month and a half that you've changed your mind on?
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, from a personal perspective, that's not definitely not related as a to nutrition coaching. I was convinced last year that I wanted to build up my home base here in Colombia, because yeah, if I as much as I love traveling, 53 countries into it, I'm a little bit tired, and I'm looking forward to not living out of my suitcase anymore. And I want to get a dog and like some things,
Uh,
build relationships a little bit deeper. So I have had the goal of finding building a home base somewhere. And unfortunately, at the end of last year, my visa here was denied for the third time. So I have to had to leave the country at the end of the year. And I thought it was terrible. I was quite devastated. I'm generally someone like I love Stoic literature and so on. So I'm like, control what you can control and forget about the things that you can't
mm,
control and
mm.
so on. So you sort of like let it be, let it go. But I was down for a few days there, and then that caused me to go to Bolivia, and now I loved Bolivia even more than I love being here. So I
Wow.
guess that was just a little bit of a lesson for me that when we try to control things too much, sometimes it's good
Mm.
to let go, and the universe or God or whatever will actually give us something even better. So that's something I personally more or less learned, not necessarily changed my mind on, but learned.
Hmm.
Um, and when it comes to the nutrition aspect or training in general, um, hmm, yeah, I don't know if there's anything that I've recently or like in the last month changed my mind on. I do think, especially like taking the holidays into consideration, that like the whole enjoyment of your surroundings and eating in good company is something that can help people. So I think the many of the times, while of course some binges happen when we're celebrating out with people, but it's those habitual times when we overeat, maybe standing in our kitchen on our own eating out of the ice cream jar or so.
Mm.
That's not good. And we intrinsically know that, we feel guilty about it. Whereas if you ate in front of other people that way, like you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't eat like an
Mm.
animal, right? So I think just that reminder of like nice community, and we see that so beautifully in some other cultures, like in Italy or so, we often picture like, oh, the big Italian family eating together, and they're sitting there, they're eating slowly, they're taking 3 hours to eat those two courses and just chatting and enjoying the presence of each other. Yeah, I would say if someone listening to this, if that resonates with you, and just creating more of those moments where you perhaps install a daily dinner with your family and you
Hmm.
say, everybody sit down and we're going to put our phones away for 20 minutes or 10 minutes, even if it's that, or a Sunday dinner, even like eating communally. I think that could be a big game changer in 2025 for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When you eat with people, generally you eat slower and
Yeah.
you develop good habits. What motivates you, Lisa Franz?
Um, what motivates me? Personally, I do get a lot of joy out of seeing when people step more into their actual truth, so into
Mm.
living a life that they really want to. And for me, somehow nutrition is that vehicle. So many times
Hmm.
I get people that just come with the goal of wanting to lose weight or looking better, and over time, because they build their self-confidence, they might end up quitting their job or starting a side project, um, or ditching a relationship that wasn't good for them and so on, like stepping into who they really are. And I'm saying this because that was also my journey. Like I lived a
Mm.
life that from the outside had looked perfect. Like
Hmm.
I was in a decent marriage, had a somewhat decent job, had a car, a dog, a house, but I was so unhappy. And I started asking myself, like, why? Like, technically speaking, textbook speaking, I should be happy. And then I learned that this is not me. Like, none of those things are things I would have chosen if it wasn't influenced by what I thought my parents wanted from me, what
Mm.
society wanted from me, and so on. And so thankfully, I was able to step out of that and create a very different life. And not saying that everybody needs to be a digital nomad and live the way that I live, but it can be small things where we're like, why am I actually doing this? Am I doing this because it's expected of me, or because I've been doing it all my life, or I'm actually doing this because I want to be doing it and I'm good at it and I love it, and it doesn't care, it doesn't matter what other people think of it. So yeah, I think that that's really a big driver for me, that gives me a lot of energy in return when I see that.
It's wonderful impact. And how do you measure success then, based on that motivation?
For me personally, a success, I would say, like, when it comes to that, I use more my values as a measure of that. So for me, a value is freedom, and a value is contribution as well. And
Mm.
so when I see that other people succeed in whatever way, that is a measure of success. So some there might be a weight loss target that we have hit, or that might be someone eating carbs again after they've been terrified of a single slice of bread for 10 years. And also just the freedom to travel to where I want to be traveling, or eating at a time that I want to be eating, and eating the kinds of foods that I want to be eating without feeling so restricted because it doesn't fit into my diet.
Mm. That's a nice way of looking at it. I love the idea, your motivation as well is just helping others. Whenever I help friends or colleagues, even if it's just a little bit, it's always so rewarding.
It is. I mean, like, technically helping is so selfish, right? Because
Right. Yeah, it
like
is.
it's not that every time I help someone I'm like already thinking about how good it's going to feel afterwards, but it is like you receive energy back, whether consciously or not. I don't think that we should be approaching helping others with the sense of, oh, that person never said thank you for this. That's so rude. How could they not? Or
Mm,
they didn't
mm,
put in the effort that I wanted them to put in. How could they not? That would be wrong if you're already expecting that kind of return. But just in general, trying to, like, make their life a little bit better, and then if through you or through what you say or inspire them to do, and their life does happen to get better, normally it's automatic that you get something positive back. And yeah, my life has truly taught me that so far.
that's wonderful. I started my business in the 90s, Lisa, and I was working way too hard. And, all the signs were there. I've been an athlete all my life, and, you know, um, 14-hour days, and, we're just working way too hard. And I'm at the doctor, and she tells me I'm at 340 pounds. So she says, if I don't lose this weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. My daughter was just born. So it scared the life out of me. And I'm driving home, and I'm yelling. I did this to myself. There's nobody else to blame. So I took the next 6, 7 months, lost 130 pounds. And like you said, you can't, these aren't temporary changes. These are permanent changes. You can't look at it. Well, I think what happens a lot of times is, well, I lost that weight. I could just lose it again. Let me go back
Mm,
to the old. It's
mm,
very bad for your body. So I
mhm,
lost 130 pounds. I kept it off, and people always ask me how, because losing weight and where we are now, where there's some of these drugs, and there's the way the food is conditioned here, especially in the States, it's very difficult. And my one word answer, Lisa, is always discipline.
mhm.
I got routine, I've got motivation, I got willpower, and discipline is how I kept it off and try to keep it off. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Lisa Franz.
Well, first of all, I want to add to that. I mean, discipline as in, like, the big word for what made you successful. But on top of that, I would say why you had a really, really strong
Mm,
why.
mm,
And I think often people don't, like, as dumb as that sounds, but they don't want it enough, or they don't want it as much as they want to eat their cookies every single day on the couch.
Mm, mm,
And so putting a little bit more of a thought into a why, and really like making that big, even if it is putting a picture on your fridge and having screensavers all over the place that remind you of what you don't want, or what you
mm,
like. For me, a positive reward is always better, but you want it to be part of your daughter's graduation. That's a huge driver. And telling yourself, I mean, you're telling me this now, like 18 years or whatever later, and at the time, like, you probably told yourself that over and over again in moments where you were tempted, just like, no, don't do that. Remember, you've got a daughter. Remember, you've got a daughter. You remember. So whatever people can find as their strong driver, their strong why, I think that that is really, really powerful. And discipline plays a humongous role in my life, and I would say in every successful client's life as well. And it doesn't have to be that really rigid discipline. I think that
mm,
that's again, that goes against the moderation part that or the maintenance part that we were talking about earlier. But discipline in the sense of 80-90% doing what needs to be done, and those 10-20% allowing yourself a little bit of flexibility. So not beating yourself up if you don't get to the gym 5 times and you only managed 4 times or 3 times this week, or not beating yourself up if you ate one extra cookie even though you only wanted to stop after one or so. So we need to have a little bit of both, but generally speaking, absolutely, because it's so, everything is so easily accessible in terms of food and so convenient. I do think the majority of people and the majority of the time, we need to practice delayed gratification, which in essence is exerting discipline. So for me, while many things don't feel like they require a lot of discipline anymore, so for me, it's actually easier to go to the gym than not to go because it's such a part of my
mm,
routine.
mm,
Um, Still, that is a small piece of discipline. But I will say that I've design my life in a way that there is minimal friction, I would call it. So like,
mm.
my gym is not an hour away from where I live. My gym is 3 minutes from here, and I can walk there. The health, I don't keep a crap ton of junk in my food to test my discipline every single day. When I eat out and I see something on the menu for dessert and I want it, I will ask whoever I'm eating with to share it with me, and that's where I enjoy it. But I don't bring it into my home because I know that would require even more discipline. I also don't stay up until, past midnight watching stuff and then struggle getting out of bed at 5 a.m. That would require a lot more discipline than being in bed earlier and being well slept. So I think the easier and we can make it for ourselves, the less friction we can have to achieve what we want to achieve, the less discipline we actually need, the less willpower we actually need. And that makes life a whole heck of a lot
Hmm.
easier. And nothing has taught me that more also than digital nomading, or like working location free, because I guess many people that may have had to work a location free, like with the pandemic or so, if you're always at home and you see the food all around you, you're constantly tempted. That's very tricky. And when I'm, for instance, traveling somewhere or living somewhere right by the beach, and everybody is there on vacation and they want to go surfing all the time, initially when I started off, I would be like, okay, sure, I'll go surfing with you in the morning, and then we'll have a nice breakfast and go for a yoga class. And then it was midday, and I hadn't gotten any work done at all. So for me personally, I learned I need to get my work done and out of the way in the morning, and
Mm,
I can play afterwards. Otherwise, I would have gone broke after like a year and had to like go back to full-time employment, 9 to 5, whatever, that I didn't want. And so for me, that was a very good and strong motivator to bring up my discipline, to get the hard thing out of the way. And I think for most people that strategy works really well, like getting your training out of the way at first, maybe the first few meals of the day, so like your breakfast, lunch, and your snack or so in the afternoon, making sure that that food quality is really high, and you get your steps out of the way. Maybe you go for a 10-minute walk after each one of your meals. So much easier than if you save all of that for, oh, I'm going to do it after work, when your willpower is already depleted, when you're already tired, when your wife wants 10 things and you still have 20 emails sitting in your inbox and you're overwhelmed, it's very easy to skip the gym at that stage. So for me, front loading works really well in terms of discipline,
Front loading.
and also just reducing the friction wherever you can.
Yeah, front loading and reducing friction. It's really cool. You're lowering or you're creating an environment in which it's less difficult
Yeah,
to fail. I know even having, cookies and things like that in the house is just the worst thing. Just get them out of here. And it's a really good way to kind of build up good habits.
agreed. 100%, 100% agree with that.
Lisa, I was looking forward to this. I thank you so much for your time today. Such great insight, and I love your energy. I love what you've done. So interesting in how you're helping people. If anybody's listening or watching, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, first of all, Joey, thank you so much for having me. This has been a true pleasure. And yeah, if someone is inspired by this and wants to follow me or wants to benefit from some of my free content online as well, you can find me as Nutrition Coaching and Life on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. Also have a website, nutritioncoachingandlife.com. My podcast is the Nutrition and Life podcast, and I'm also on LinkedIn. So anywhere, nutrition coaching and life, that's kind of where you can find me. And if you're listening to this and you find me through this wonderful podcast here, please drop me a line, leave me a comment or a message, and telling me that you found me through Joey would be my pleasure.
Nutritioncoachingandlife.com. Like you said, you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Thank you so much for your time, Lisa. I hope you never know with your nomadic travels. Maybe one day we'll meet face to face and have a cup of tea.
That would be my pleasure. Absolutely.
You be well.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.